So I'm going to go ahead and start since we're at 3:01 and we have 3 guest speakers today. And I want to make sure that we're using that we've got to use all our time because we have a lot to cover. I'm really excited about this session. And to be able to feature, current Arkansas traditions and folk arts, things that are happening right now in our state. I just think that's really cool. So I'm going to do a short introduction for all 3 of our speakers, and then we're going to go in order, in that order that I introduce them. So first we have Pat Bergman, and Pat is a metalsmith who lives in Marion County, not Stone County, which is what I've had written elsewhere. So apologies for that. She lives in Marion County, and she's been practicing her tradition for over 40 years, and she's finishing her 2nd year with her apprentice, Amy. We also have Sage Holland, who is from Stone County. Sage has practiced her tradition of glass bead making for over 30 years, and she's finishing up with her apprentice River in their first year together, in their year together. And then lastly, we have Allison Williams, and she's an old-time musician. Allison plays the clawhammer banjo, among other instruments, and also specializes in ballads, and she lives in the Fayetteville area. She's been working with her apprentice, who's also named Allison, for this past year. So after each speaker, some of you guys may have some questions, but if you could just hold off until the end, we'll have a set time for questions at the end where you can ask anyone. So I'm going to go ahead and get our first slideshow pulled up. Play from start. So Pat, you are ready to go.
Okay. Hi, I'm Patricia Bergman, and I'm a metalsmith, like Lauren said. Over 2 years ago, those of us who relied on the art and craft show circuit for our source of income were at a loss when all shows canceled. I envisioned us losing our home and who knows what else. This is when I received a text from Rachel Reynolds suggesting that I apply for an apprenticeship grant. I did, and I received it. What a gift. Thank you, Rachel. My journey to Arkansas began when several friends and family, including me, decided to take up roots and move to Yellville, Arkansas, coming from various parts of the country. I came from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, where I was born and raised. It was our intention to live off the land. I helped build a small cabin where I would live for 5 years. During that time, I was given the opportunity to be part of a health food store and restaurant. This lasted for 2 years, and then it was time to figure out what I wanted to do next. One day I received a call from an acquaintance who was a metalsmith, asking if I would help her fill a jewelry order. With no hesitation, my response was, if you will be willing to teach me. So in 1978, I began a 6-month apprenticeship with Master Metalsmith Courtney Peterson. Never did I imagine that 44 years later, I would look back on a life of creating jewelry and hair accessories. The learning process was quite challenging, but with perseverance, I realized that I could actually do this. Along with my husband, who began helping with different aspects, we then saw it was a possible livelihood. The process not only meant producing work, but learning what's involved in living on the road, doing art shows, It not only included sending professional slides of your work, but creating a professional looking booth and having a dependable vehicle, just to name a few. These images show us the early years, beginning with a very simple booth, but it did work. In the third image, I'm buffing jewelry, which eventually was done mostly by my husband. And then on to frame 4. Here you see me using a little anvil in image number 1, which I continue to use today for shaping and hammering. Larry is buffing jewelry in image 2. In image 3, I'm using an oxygen acetylene torch, which gives me much versatility. It can be used both for silver soldering and is hot enough to melt different metals. In image 4, this booth became a step up from just using tables in our booth. Back in those days, canopies were not easily available. So you prayed for fair weather because most shows were held outdoors. Frame 5. In 1987, we very happily became parents of Thomas. And in 1991, excuse me, Ellen was born. Both are shown in image 1, and image 2 is us before having children. In image 3, Thomas and Ellen are shown from the left with their friends at the Pennsylvania Renaissance Fair. From 1987 to 2002, we would be packing up the jewelry shop and usually spend at least 16 weeks there making jewelry in our shop. The kids loved this lifestyle. For them, it was like living at Disney World in the 17th century. Through those years, Larry and I would share responsibilities rearing our children as we continued our travels. We couldn't imagine doing it any other way. They would travel to shows and become a part of the family business in their own way. Image 4 is our jewelry shop there at the Renaissance Fair. For a few years, we actually lived upstairs. Yes, I learned to be resilient. Frame 6. Now to explain the process of working with the metal. I begin with various gauges of both sheet and wire metal, using brass, copper, and silver, and German silver. With that, I create earrings, rings, pendants, bracelets, and necklaces. I also make hair accessories, which include barrettes, hair combs, and hairpins, using the same process. With the metal, I sometimes etch it first. It is also used for designing. The wire is bent and twisted. It is also soldered, combining pieces for designing or riveting together. Finishing work involves either polishing or applying a patina finish. Image 1 and 3 shows us giving finished pieces a non-tarnished finish. In image 2, Thomas, now grown, is shaping pieces with a ball peen hammer, although he's not working with me right anymore. Frame 7. In image number 1, in order to work efficiently, one learns to design several pieces at a time. On this image, I was designing hairpins with each one given a different design. On the next 3 images, you'll see another process, which I learned from master metalsmith Suzette Nesbitt Walker. Etched metal and riveting have added another dimension to my work. In image 3, you see a sheet of German silver that I've drawn on with an oil-based Sharpie pen. I call it doodling, and I love doing it. Image 4 are pieces that were immersed in ferric chloride, where they are etched. Image 2 is etched pieces that are ready to be designed and finished. On this last image are many shapes I prepare to use for designing. My studio is in the basement of our home, which is on the next frame. It's very unconventional as I adapted it to fit my needs. Many traditional hand tools are used. They include various cutters, pliers, hammers, anvils, mandrels, files, jeweler's saws, a rolling mill, doming block, and an etching tank, which is just to name a few. My list of motorized equipment includes a Fordham flexible shaft, a tumbler using steel shot, a drill press, and a high-speed buffing and polishing wheel. The next frame shows these three barrettes were made by soldering pieces of metal together, which is the first process that I used to learn to make pieces of jewelry and hair accessories. And then in frame 10, these barrettes, image number 1 is soldered with a verdigris finish. And when we use the word verdigris, it also means green or turquoise color. The other 3 are etched and riveted. And yes, I also make my own rivets for this process. And then in frame 11, there are lots of barrettes there, which are all etched and riveted, except for a few plain ones that again have the verdigris finish on them, and I melt holes into them. People like that look. And then frame 12, image 3 is a very simple wire barrette with an etched finish, and I usually call that design the squiggle barrette. The rest are soldered, and as you can see in frame 1, they're brass, copper, and silver that are all pieced together and soldered. And then the middle one is all have a verdigris finish on them, but also soldered. Frame 13. These hair combs are all etched and riveted that you see here. The last one there, sometimes when you put them in solutions, you get surprise finishes. You don't, and sometimes they turn out nice, but you don't know how to repeat it. That's the frustrating part. This work is all soldered. I occasionally do use stones in my work, which you see in frame 3, or in the third one. Then in frame 15, these earrings are all etched and riveted with a verdigris finish on some. And that definitely is a very new look from what I did the first 20 some years of my metal smithing. Okay, then frame 16. The first two images on the left are etched earrings again. And the frame on the right are more simplified designed earrings, which are simply, I hand fold them with a round a round needle nose pliers, and melt around the edges of them with the torch. And then again, most of them have the verdigris finish on them also. Okay, and then here are some samples of pendants made with etched metals, some with a verdigris finish and riveted. And that is my later way of making my work again. Through the years, the look of my work has evolved as I realized all the endless techniques used, along with so many possibilities for designing. And then, yeah, there's a lot of them there if you need to look at them later. Okay, frame 20 is my, oh, okay, I'm ahead of myself. Here are more similar pendants. The last one on here shows one unfinished piece of work which still needs riveting done to it. It sort of shows you the process a little better. Okay, and then in frame 20, my current booth gives me options to set up in different configurations, as you see through the different images there. And I really like to be the flexibility of doing that. Frame 21, here we're open for business. The second image shows a barrette being modeled at one of the shows. And Larry's standing in the background on that third image. Frame 22, we had many booth changes through the years, with image 4 being the current look. But I also do have some of the work on a screen in the booth, which works out well also, which is in, I guess you'd call the third image here. Frame 23. In November 2020, I was awarded an apprentice grant, and 1 year later, I received another one. I've known my apprentice, Amy, who is right here beside me, for many years, knowing she was interested in learning metalsmithing. She accepted the invitation with no hesitation. I didn't mean to rhyme that. In the second image, Amy displayed her work at the Yellowville Farmers Market several weeks ago. Well, actually about 6 months ago, and sold several pieces. In image 3, I'm shown receiving an award at a show. Frame 24, these 4 images show Amy and me showing simple metalsmithing skills to some children after school. Learning the use of several hand tools, the students were able to make a ring, a pendant, and a bracelet, which we didn't get very good pictures of those. But they were thrilled and had lots of fun doing that. Going on Amy's second year as my apprentice, she's been taught most of the skills and techniques which I use. At this point in time, she's producing work to sell. She was accepted into a juried show for the first time in Nashville, which we did together just a week ago. In June, we'll go to Columbia, Missouri for another show. And then I told her probably not too many more than that I would be doing. This is my first time teaching at this level, and I consider it an honor to be given this opportunity. I love teaching Amy. For me, working with metal will always be a passion. I never minded working long hours. It was a busy life, but when you enjoy what you're doing, it's a fun life. Thanks a lot.
Bravo.
Yeah, that was so great, Pat. So thank you for that. So now we'll go ahead and move on to Sage.
Okay, so share screen, and there's that. And then there we go. All right. Oops. Uh-oh. Sorry. Okay. I am going to show a long period of time, but also a few ancient beads with techniques, just to suggest how we derive so much from studying old glass. And then also I'll show work of Tom's and also Bo Anderson's. But I was born in Independence, Missouri on Independence Day and raised in Southern California, but then moved to Washington State, the Puget Sound area. And after being there for a while, I started doing a lot of different art forms, and I wanted to do bead work, but I couldn't find any interesting beads because it had been, I don't know, maybe 100 years or so since one-of-a-kind beads were made. These are my very first beads, that were worth putting on a necklace. So this picture is 34 years old, and it's good to start as a bead maker with simple winding of molten glass, maybe try dotting and a little stringer work, but don't want to get ahead of yourself with molten glass. This is my studio in Bellingham. You can see the raw materials in the back. That's the long rods of colored glass. Some are transparent, some are opaque. We use soft glass, which has a coefficient of 104. And that's more similar to ancient glass formulas, as opposed to hard glass, which has a coefficient of, I think, 36 and takes more fuel. So soft glass is for us. This is when I moved to Arkansas because like 5 years after starting and being a bead maker, I went to different conferences and I would run into this guy. And he has been a big, huge part of about half of my life now. And he and I kept running into each other, and first in Washington, D.C., then in Santa Fe, and then one more time in Prescott, Arizona at the first contemporary glass bead exhibit, which is what spurred on the International Society of Glass Bead Makers. And so when I moved to Arkansas, I also brought my son, part-time anyway. He's about 16 in this picture. We had just come back from the Seattle Folklife Festival. If you ever get a chance to go to that Folklife Festival, it's in the Seattle Center. So he's also a bead maker, and we all inspire each other, keep each other going on the art form because it could be quite tedious. Well, I fell in love with the people of Arkansas, and we would have bead stringing events and get-togethers, and we would sing around the table, and then eventually we got a chance to get out and enjoy the land too. And I love the the environment of Arkansas. It's so rugged and full of surprises. So I'm starting off here with a little ancient glass. This is a core vessel from Syria, about 300 BC, and it uses techniques that we use now and we teach, and it has side shifting. So they would be tooling the different lines which were trailed on there, and you can see the gold particles in that. They actually used real particulate gold in ancient times. This is an interesting comparison. The bead on the right is from the New Kingdom in Egypt, and the bead on the left is Javanese. So the Egyptian bead is 100 BC and the Javanese bead is 600 AD. And they were both using surface manipulation of trailed designs. This is one of our favorite time periods. This is the Warring States glass bead making. They had a time period between 440 BC to 220 BC, only a short period of time when they were excellent in making dots, and they made a lot of patterns with those dots. We call them stratified eyes, and then the ones with multiple dots are rosettes. This photo is by Robert Lew of Ornament Magazine. So we did a lot of practicing with that in mind and teach a lot with those techniques because it's something that leads to greater things. When we never produce anything to fake and make pass as original Warring States beads, not if we can help it. So this is a more contemporary approach at using the dots, and there's side glancing and feathering of the dots and a rosette and tiny dots. And here's one of Beau's, and he is got younger eyes, but he has almost as much experience. And so he does many what we call dot samplers in a workshop environment. Here's the other side of that bead, even more arrangements of using the dots on top of dots, and it's just mind-blowing. Back to our research. Here are core vessels again. I think you can see a transition going between before and after blown glass here. This is at the Smithsonian. So they didn't have blown glass until about 30 AD, or didn't discover it. So they made their vessels winding or wrapping molten glass around a core. And I think over on the right, the darkest one is blown, but the other ones are not. And they're New Kingdom as well, Egyptian. This is Hellenistic pendants. And there's a little hole at the very top, so they hang down. They're pendants because they do that hanging down thing. And I love the way that the transparent and opaque glass create those lines. It's very agate-like. So we use that style or that technique a lot and teach it as well. Many of our students over the years, one in particular has really run with that. This is a prayer scroll from the Middle Ages, Persia in the Islamic period. And you can see there are a lot of stringer lines and then manipulating with a knife. It's broken. We learn a lot from ancient broken beads. And of course, they're pretty hard to find. And we can sometimes trade our work for a broken bead. So this is folded beads. They're also from the Middle Ages. There's a lot of examples of variations of very unusual folded beads from that period, and we love to teach that too. This is a prayer scroll, and it has been repaired because it was so treasured by the wearers, but it mimics the silver prayer scrolls that you might be aware of in other cultures. These are chevron beads, and they're Venetian, and they're 1500 to 1800 AD. And they represent blown and drawn technique, which is when they started getting away from making one bead at a time and getting into making more quantity-based beads. Because you make the cane, which is a big project, in the furnace, and then you blow an air cavity into it, and then you grind away to expose the pattern that is put there through dipping the colors into an optic mold. So this is not a chevron, but it has a concentric ring cane. It's also from Venice, a little more recent, early 1900, late 1800, and it's lapidaried. So it's one of the beads that taught Tom a lot about how to lapidary beads. We do a lot of lapidary. This is called a Lewis and Clark bead. However, Lewis and Clark supposedly didn't carry these with them. They had more monochrome beads, but this is the kind of bead that you would maybe find. It's from Murano or Venice, in the ground, maybe in Arkansas or on the West Coast, and also in Africa. This is a Phoenician head bead, and it is from an earlier time period, 500 BC. A Phoenician head bead is pretty rare. I've seen fakes, and I don't make mine to look fake at all. You can tell that they're meant to be contemporary. I like to put different expressions on them. So these are mine. Moving into contemporary beads now. I like to do many different variations on miniature vessels. And this is a life ring. Tom and I do a lot of collaborating. And there's a way you can do the different patterning, dots, lines, surface manipulation, and then cool it and then bend it. And he likes to bend it all around to meet itself again and create a pendant. I try and do some marbles. I like to keep my hand at it because it takes a lot of practice to do soft glass marbles. And I also enjoy making flowers. This is a totem, older altar totem of flower subject matter. And then the bottom is a base that Tom made, and it's a folded bead, a giant folded bead. So I'm particularly known for eye beads. I'm considered the first in America and contemporary times to make more complicated eye beads rather than the ones that are just blue and white. This is one that's supposed to look like an eye of Horus from Egypt. Here's another with more layers. And then we also do buttons and many different types of life rings and eye beads. And you can just spend forever learning different techniques to make new and different patterns. And it does take dedication. Here's another eye bead. I had a commission recently, and it was for a wolf totem necklace. And I really enjoy special orders like that, usually. I am also known for mask beads and pendants with elements of the face on it. This is a pictorial cane in progress. I don't do a lot of pictorial canes in the summer because it's such a large amount of glass. But when you do get them done, then you cut chips of them. And it's an ancient Roman and Egyptian technique. So faces make me think of the community, the ever expanding circles of the bead world. This is in Santa Fe many years ago. Ed, you might remember that year. And some of these people are from Seattle, some are from Italy, but it's just the ever expanding circles that you get to meet at the bead conferences, because it has become an international phenomenon. I would compare it a little bit to how the ceramic world, it was kind of quiet in the 50s, and all of a sudden, boom, there's this wave of energy and passion for an art form. And so we were on the first part of that wave. These are some more friends, Lewis Wilson and Terry Caspery Smith. And Lewis is one of the heavy hitters. He's been in the glass world for a very long time, in the bead making and sculpture world, and his wife, Barbara. And I was involved in precious metal clay at the very first, when they first came out with the medium. I was the one that they gave enough, free ounces to test. They wanted to know if it was viable to melt it into the glass. And I was the one that had success, fortunately. And it was documented in Ornament magazine. Here's another piece. More circles of friends. These are wonderful glass workers we met at France in Sars Patries. It's a museum in northern France, and it's just for glass, but they have biannual for beads. I do a little bit of blowing. This is a necklace. I like the light weight of blown pieces. I also do some shells, blown shells, and blown vessels that I didn't get a picture of. I like to do discs and lots of detail on the discs. Also something called conversation beads, where I have silhouettes on either side, and then the different elements of conversation in between. And then on to folded beads, how we have used the technique of folding. And you start with circles, big discs, and you fold them in different arrangements. This is a collection of mine and Tom's, and there's raised folded beads left unmelted completely. There's a double fold, triple fold, and then the ones that are totally smooth are triple folds that have more smoothness from fire polishing. Here are some critters, kind of an old picture, but a good reminder. I like to do fish. I enjoy doing a lot of scales. Of course, it takes a long time. That's about 300 dot applications, if not more, to get those overlapping scales. This type of fish takes a lot less time. However, it does have some gold leaf in it. Now, these are twisted canes, one of the many components you can make to include in your work to add detail. So you make them in advance, and they can take a good amount of time themselves, and then you add that to your bead. This is one thing that you might do with your twisted cane. There's blown beads, and then we also make a lot of discs with twisted cane. This is a spiral cane that I made, that I created a lapidary bead with, and I'd like to recreate that, and I have tried. You can see the top in this collection. I'm trying to recreate that one, but you have to get all these subtleties exactly right. So my work is in the middle, and Tom's is on the outside here. It's lapidary family cane for Tom, and it's named family cane because we all came up with the colors. This is Tom. He's showing here at the International Bead Society Conference. And it used to be in a different state every year, but now it's just in Las Vegas or online. But it's just a great place to get your work out there. Tom is the one of the award winners of the Hall of Flame, International Society of Glass Beadmakers Hall of Flame inductee. And it's for slideshows and educational things and demonstrations, and his way of giving lectures. So this is one of Tom's pieces. You can tell the stratified dots, and it's also a life ring. This is a bad photo of a great bead, but it's stringer work, which is really difficult. I consider stringer work some of the hardest types of techniques, but it's a knot with a web matrix in the back. These are some of Tom's newest beads. He's building a barn, so he hasn't had a chance to make very many beads. But these are hand-pulled chevron canes, and they're lapidaried in different shapes. He's really excited about doing something new with chevrons because everybody loves chevrons in the bead world. Here's a blown bead with hand-pulled chevron cane. He makes the cage or the structure with the slices and then heats them up and meticulously blows and makes a lightweight pendant. This is a open fold, which is a blossom necklace, we call it. These are all Tom's. This is another life ring that Tom made. He calls that a firecracker bead. And it's all stringer work that's been manipulated and feathered. Here's a nice picture of some of his family cane. And it's the big and the little. So big cane and little cane, all carefully melted onto silver. And then lapidaries. There's so many hours of work and work like this. And now we get into some of Bo. And he is really one of the most generous and skillful teachers you're ever going to come across. And here he is in St. Louis teaching at Third Degree. They have a good lamp working studio, and they also have all kinds of other furnace working and lapidary working. So this is one of Bo's dot beads. This bead recently was purchased at the Sweeney collection. It's the nation's only bead, contemporary bead museum. These are some more of Bo's pieces. You can see he also does flowers. I'm wearing that bead, the eye bead right now. I love that bead, but it's for sale. And then here are some of his montages, which means the silver and the glass, and the intense detail. He loves symmetry. Here's another one that also has some small face marinis out on the outer rim. He'll be teaching a class on this in Italy this year in the mountains above Milan, I believe. Here's one of Beau's fish, and he uses the scale technique gracefully. And this is one of his older beads using masking, which is dots on top of dots to create unusual patterns. Now I like to do some representational work, lizards, birds. This is a collection of 3 of us, Beau in the front, Tom and myself. This is based on the Hellenistic pendant that I showed earlier. And this is based on that feathered dot from the Lewis and Clark bead with the twisted cane. This is stringer work. It's a tree of life. I enjoy making snake necklaces. I don't make very many because you have to make so many beads. These are prayer scrolls, which is getting that look where it's 2 components together. And I'm using a lot of feathering of a lot of stringer work and dots. And here's some bent beads, which is creating a different shape after you cool down the straight bead that has all the patterns and colors carefully done. There's dot work and stringer work and furrowing and feathering and all kinds of techniques in those. And this is a necklace, and there's more traditional looking handmade beads, and then the center bead is more contemporary. And that center bead I made again, and we bent it into a life ring, and it had all those dots on the one side fold into the center of the hole. I hope we can try that again. This is a dragon totem I made for somebody, and a frog totem, a bird totem, and then I love unity through diversity necklaces. I make these slowly. You know, I gather them. They have to be graduated in all different colors, so it really takes a while to get the right ones. And these are some more pendants. And then a happy face. If you see it in there, then you're happy, right? So here's River. I'm going to talk a little bit about him. I've known River since he was really young, like since he was born. And he's part of our community, part of the artist community, really. However, he is like not an artist until recently. So he's gotten into bead making. He took some classes with me, but come to find out, he is also into history. So he understands learning from the techniques we derived from our research. He's looking at a book that we have called The History of Beads by Lois Sher-Dubin. And that particular picture is starting the contemporary section from the collection of international bead makers, and that's one of Tom's necklaces there. And here he is. You can see he's holding the stringer. Tom's helping him. He's very lucky to have both of us sometimes. And I think he's holding the stringer in the wrong direction, but Tom thinks he's holding the stringer in the right direction. Anyway, stringer's hard. Okay, and this is one of River's beads. And I love the colors of this. He's trying to control the dots. It's hard not to overwork things. And it is also evident that the perforations need a little work. So, you know, I don't think he'll have that problem again, though. So this is one of the beads that he sold at his very first sale that he had here at the Arkansas Craft Gallery. And that just happened last weekend, and he was thrilled. Many of his family and friends, and then additional customers came in. I live west of Fox. This is an old sign from the old country store, which is really a wonderful store, except they don't have this great sign anymore. And I live down in the Meadow Creek Valley, and if you ever come down here, you'll see it's an incredibly beautiful place, and there's also dormitories where you can bring large groups or small groups. So this is a view of what I consider my church. I go to different points that are part of the Meadow Creek Valley. I feel so fortunate to be in this very sacred place. And we also live on the creek. So if you ever come down here, maybe the Off of the Beaten Path studio tour, that I'll be there at the dorm in September for the Off the Beaten Path studio tour. And maybe I'll see you on the trail. Okay, I'm done. Did I do good? Did I go over?
Well, you did so good. I don't think you went over. I think we're okay.
Oh, good. Thanks. I usually need an hour for that.
So our last guest speaker is Allison. I'm so glad that you made it in. We had some technical difficulties earlier, so I'm gonna let you talk now.
Okay, great. Everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Cool. So my name is Allison Williams. I am from Fayetteville, Arkansas. I currently live in Greenland, which is just a little bit south of there. And I grew up with old time music around me, but it wasn't something that I really noticed or paid attention to. You know, my dad played a little guitar. My mother was a music teacher and a social worker, and so they both, you know, we always had a piano. We always had instruments around. But I wanted to play punk rock. So that was what I did. You know, I think I learned to play guitar when I was about 15, and then I learned to play bass and drums when I was about 19. So that's what I did for a long time. I toured around. I went to college on the West Coast, and got my degree in audio engineering, because frankly, punk rock touring does not put money on the, it doesn't put money in the bank, it doesn't put food on the table. So when after I graduated college, I moved down to Portland, Oregon. It was a great music scene. And I met a bunch of people who were playing old time music. And they were playing it in a way that that I hadn't seen it approached before. These were, you know, young folks my age, and they were approaching this music with so much joy and so much passion and reverence, really, like a joyful reverence. And I had never really seen the music through that lens before. I started playing banjo, and I started going to square dances, and it was really great. It was a wonderful time, and I was equally excited to be able to come back to the South and to learn about this music through a different lens. So I did. I remember I just moved back here, and I took a trip out to Mountain View for the folk festival. And I got to meet everybody, all the great local musicians, Dave Smith, Billy Matthews, Pete Howard, Clark Bueling, so many other really, Curly Miller and Carol Ann Rose. Yeah, it was really, really wonderful. And so I spent a few years here back home, and then I ended up through a whirlwind series of events. I ended up in North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina. So I stayed there for about 3 years, and during that time, I was going to festivals in the region, going to Clifftop, Mount Airy, Galax, any festival that I could get to. And so these old time festivals are, you know, it's not like bands are playing and you're listening to them. You know, there might be band contests or instrument contests, but generally everyone's just sitting around playing together. So so I got really, really immersed in that. And it was really wonderful. And I just tried to learn as much as I possibly could. I would track down banjo players that I really admired, and, you know, just ask them. It was incredibly bold. I would just ask them, hey, can you teach me something? You know, can you teach me a tune? And Kirk Sutphin was a banjo player that really taught me a lot. He really was kind enough to sit down with me and show me all kinds of things. And I also began playing with Dave Bass, who is a powerhouse fiddler, steeped in Round Peak style, which is, Round Peak is an area on the border of North Carolina and Virginia, including Mount Airy and Galax. And it has a very distinctive style with a lot of African-American influences. And it's great dance music. So I toured with our band, with Dave Bass, called the Forge Mountain Diggers, for several years. And I moved to Tennessee after that. And I got to work with Bobby Fulcher. I don't know if any of y'all know him. He is one of the greatest field recorders in the country, I think, folklorist and field recorder, but he's able to do it all under the auspices of the Tennessee State Parks. So he created this park called the Cumberland Trail, which is a hiking trail that runs from Chattanooga up to the Cumberland Gap. But it has an inherent mission of cultural preservation. So through that, he has been able to record all of the local musicians in any county that the trail goes through, recording local musicians, oral histories, you know, photographing crafts, putting on concerts, being able to get these musicians out and playing. And share that music with everyone else. So I worked with Bobby for several years, did folklore field work for him, and got to meet and learn from a lot of really wonderful Tennessee musicians during that time. And after that, I went to Nashville and worked for a while at the Tennessee State Library and Archives, digitizing the Tennessee State Parks Folklife project, which Bobby had created in the 1980s through an NEA grant. So every summer he would have folklorists that would come and stay in the parks, you know, grad students, and they would go out and they would record everybody. They would photograph everything. So there's this massive, you know, like 5 years or more of that archive in the Tennessee State Library and Archives. So, so yeah, I've been really lucky to be able to get exposed to all kinds of musical traditions. And dance traditions as well. I began calling square dances at a festival called Mount Airy. I was lucky there are a bunch of other folks my age who were really excited about learning to call. And we taught ourselves, you know, we would go to dances and we would scribble down all of the calls and all of the patter. And then we would have these midnight square dances during the festival after all the contests were over. And we would just take turns calling and learning. Yeah, really fun stuff. I also got to do a little bit of field recording of my own. I met Tillman Pyatt, who was kind of a staple of the Mountain View music community, him and his wife, Molly. And they were living in Fayetteville during a time that I was there. I've moved back and forth a lot. But I was able to make some recordings of him and Molly and learned a lot about Ozark fiddle style, about the way that that musicians working at Mountain View has kind of changed that fiddle style, influenced it. And I got to learn a lot of ballads, wonderful ballads as well. So I moved back home to Northwest Arkansas about 10 years ago. I started teaching music and discovered that I really loved it. I ran a small music store, Maybell Music, from 2013 to 2018, and teaching there, and learned how to repair instruments as well. I organized the traditional music workshops for the Fayetteville Roots Festival for several years. So I was able to get great local musicians like David Scrivener and Nathan McAllister and Kim Lansford down here, and able to get them paid and, you know, help them to share their craft with others. And I founded the Fayetteville Square Dance, a monthly event with live music from local old time musicians. And that ran right up to COVID. And we haven't started up again yet. But I did start a very small nonprofit called Ozark Traditional Arts. And I started essentially to support the square dance. But in lieu of that, we're looking at a lot of other cool projects, and we've been partnering with lots of other great organizations. Sage was talking about Meadow Creek, the Meadow Creek area. There's also a nonprofit there that has been doing a lot of concerts, workshops, and music festivals, having artist residencies, all kinds of really wonderful stuff. So I've been able to work with Rachel Reynolds and Cindy Wolf and Mark Blue and all the other great folks in that community. So we put on the first old time music festival at Meadow Creek last fall, and then we're planning another one for this fall. So I'm very excited about that. So I'd like to talk a little bit about my student, Allison Langston. She came to me just looking for lessons, essentially. And so I worked with her for a little while, and then we learned about this project. And so yeah, I certainly didn't think that we would get it, but I feel so lucky to be able to do this. So thank y'all. But Allison is just a learning sponge. She is so passionate about old time music. She's passionate about the history of it, the current state of it, I guess. She's somebody who understands that old time music has a very complicated history, has a complicated racial history, a complicated history regarding gender and sexuality. And some of it, there are some wonderful things about it that appeal to me as a modern woman. There's a certain anti-authoritarian sentiment. There's a lot of freedom, a lot of joy in there. But there's also a lot of, like I said, racism and sexism in there. So she came to me and really wanted to have a lesson, but really she just wanted to sit down and have a conversation, like a long, half-hour conversation with me about this stuff, about how do I play this music with such a complicated history in a way that is ethical and in a way that you're not trying to whitewash the history of it, but at the same time, how do you address these issues? And that is a very long conversation I'd be happy to have with any of y'all later, but I won't try to bore you with it right now. But yeah, so she's doing really, really well. We've learned a bunch of banjo tunes, several ballads, and rhythm guitar was another one of our goals. And in June, Allison will be backing up me and Rachel Reynolds for several square dance events. So I'm really, really happy. She has come really far in a really short period of time, and she's now a very capable banjo player, ballad singer, and rhythm guitarist. So I'm really excited to see what else she's going to learn. Could I play a song for y'all? Okay, great. So this is one of the songs that we've learned. So is this volume good? Am I going to distort or anything?
So far, so good. Yeah.
Okay, great. So this is called My Ozark Mountain Home. It's an old song. It's on the county. I think it's called just Music of the Ozarks, or Old Time Music of the Ozarks. It's on that set. There's a place place that's far away, and a little mound of clay that recalls to me the days of long ago, when I'd sit on mother's knee and she'd talk and sing to me how I loved her voice and action sweet and low. Her love will always linger, I can see her day by day as she sat there in that little cabin home. Though the house is blown away and the fields with grass of gray, I can never forget my Ozark mountain home. Well, I bow my head in sorrow, for I know we'll meet tomorrow in that little mountain clay there in the hill. I'm going back and build a shack by that little mound of clay. I'm going back, build a shack in those Ozark hills far away. That's a short version, but yeah. So I'm excited about the question and answer session. I'm really excited to hear what.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed hearing your story. Oh my gosh, you guys, we have so much talent in this program and in the state. I knew that this was going to be so wonderful, but I'm sort of just blown away to be here. So yeah, so if anybody has questions, the only thing I want to say aside from thank you is, our apprenticeship applications will open back up in June, and Virginia has put a link in the chat. And then we also have another session in June that is going to be focused on the Elaine Legacy Center and stories and songs from Elaine. And I'm going to put the link for registration in the chat as well. So now anybody who has any questions, just go ahead.
How long have you been playing the banjo, Allison? I forget, 10 years, right?
No, a lot longer than that. I probably started started around 2000. Yeah, 2000, somewhere between 2000 and 2003 is when I started. So yeah, closer to 20.
Oh, it's just so beautiful. I love that style.
Thank you.
And look forward to seeing you at Meadow Creek.
I have a question for Sage. I'm curious to learn more about your prayer beads. This is Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Is there anything inside of them, or like a prayer drum, or?
Well, they're styled to emulate the ones that were made of silver that do have a drum that you can take and unscrew. And I have made some like that with a core vessel. And there can be prayer put in, but the ones that are from the early glass Middle Ages and before that, they're a symbol of that, I think, because they're designed to look like the ones that you can put a prayer in. And I think that anytime you have a prayer or a wish or something you want to focus into, that it doesn't necessarily have to be a piece of paper. It can just be energy that you put into it.
I love that. That's very cool.
Yeah. Patricia, I love seeing all your work. I mean, the ways that you get the texture on there, just gorgeous. The patinas too. Oh, and the ones that they're very fluid, like Art Nouveau, with all the scroll work. So beautiful.
Well, thank you. Coming from you, that's quite a compliment.
Well, we get around to a lot of shows, and there's a certain level of jewelry that I don't necessarily fit into when it comes to people who think that glass somehow is not going to be ever a real jewelry, which is more stones, you know, high price stones to some people. But it's hard to do something that is small and have people look at it. So you do have to appeal to people who are looking for jewelry.
Right.
But we find, like, we just did a show in May, and it was really windy and hardly anybody really came. But we still did well enough because we appeal to kids too, and then their parents. And anytime they come and they look closely, and I think for your work, you know, requires that too, especially the stuff with the texture and the patterns. And
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question for each of you to answer. So you've all done some teaching now, and I wonder, you know, what is your greatest, you know, maybe what's your greatest lesson that you've learned through the teaching experience, or what's one lesson, I guess, maybe not the greatest, that's a little too much pressure.
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
Well, I've learned so much. It's hard to take one thing. I have learned. I've learned about my own playing much more, because you have to break everything down into small units of information that all fit together. You can't just play a tune for somebody and then say, "All right, go play that." So I have learned about my own technique. I've learned how to describe my own technique. I've learned how to convey it, and I've learned how to fix bad habits. I'm a much better banjo player than when I started teaching, I think. And another lesson that I've had to learn is that your students will ask you questions that you don't know the answers to. And you will have to go out and learn those answers. You'll have to go out and find those answers and be able to bring it back to them at the next lesson. And you have to be able to put your ego aside and say, actually, I never expected anyone would ask me that question, and I don't know the answer to it. So yeah, teaching, in my experience, has made me a better person all around. It's made me smarter, more informed, and a better player.
I love that. Sage or Pat, do you want to take a shot at what you've learned through teaching?
Oh my, I feel like I learned so much because you really had to go deep into your mind and from where you started yourself. And after it's been going on for so long, Amy was amazed to see my shop because I have probably 500,000 pieces half made. And she said, "Why are these all laying here?" And during the time that I was on the road doing shows, I could remake a piece rather than fix it to take it to a show. So she has incorporated the whole idea into my mind that it's time to get these half-made pieces out. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them except that they need a little more time put into them. And that's just one tiny segment. I've learned, I never really had a chance to teach at this level before, and I really do enjoy it. I didn't know if I would be able to convey to another person, you know, what I was able to do. And it, you know, it's a whole learning experience just to keep moving on to another step and another step and another step. So it takes a lot of patience.
mm-hmm. Yeah, patience. That's the big one.
Okay, so Sage, what about you?
Well, I started teaching after working on my own art way back, because there weren't any other teachers. There were very few ways for people to learn. And so patience, yeah, is a big one. And I really don't like big classes, however, and that's not an issue anymore, but because it was so popular, there were times when we had 10 students on torches, 13 students on torches. It's really important to have a teacher's aide at that situation, because everybody's different. And whether their torch is too high or too low, or whether their glasses are not on, and you have to really babysit in a way, just to keep everybody safe. And then intermediate students are a lot easier, as they already have overcome the fear of fire, and just to let go too, because I know we've taught over 1,000 people. And so I have students that, are very, very great teachers, and they're in different parts of the country, in different parts of the world. And we're kind of forgotten these days, and that's fine. So letting go of the thing is kind of part of it. But I really am thankful to have this opportunity, and spend quality one-on-one time. That's so valuable. And I have a veteran. He's come to me once before, and he'll come next week, and we're going to focus on marbles. And he'll come into Meadow Creek to the dorm there. We'll set up a couple torches, and it's really good for post-traumatic syndrome. And because you focus everything, there's no way you can stop your thoughts enough to be with the glass and with the melting and the gravity that you have to be constantly aware of. And so it helps people with stress and their heart issues. And so he wants to learn cremation remains, and this is something that I learned not too long ago, maybe 6 years ago. And there's always something new to put your glass skills into. That it's unlimited. All the colors and the combination of colors and the techniques keep advancing in the contemporary times. So it's good for the mind. That's what I learned.
Okay, so do we have any other questions?
Pat, do you have any shows this summer?
Well, I'm getting up in age, and when the pandemic hit, it was almost like a blessing, because we didn't have the sense to know that it was time to slow down. So we were forced to.
Yeah.
And that's when, I had the opportunity then to work with Amy. And that was at such a much slower pace. And, we were doing over 30 shows a year.
Wow.
And driving long distances. And so anyway, we were forced to do what we needed to do in the first place.
Yeah.
And so I can't remember what you actually asked me.
Oh, no shows in the summer.
Oh, no, I don't. Yeah, the only time we had off was the part of December and January, February, and then back to shows again in the middle of March.
Wow.
So
June, second week of June is your next show.
yeah,
You do have one.
Right. Yeah, Amy's forcing me to go to a few shows with her for a while.
Good.
And so that's sort of up in the air right now to see how much we're going to do.
Yeah.
She's very capable of doing them herself. We just get along really well, are having a good time. And yeah, it's hard to, just go off on your own then. So.
And Allison, I'm sorry to hear that you were in Mountain View at the folk festival, and I didn't get a chance to come over and see you. I was right there. We have the artisans market behind the square there.
It was that particular time I was talking about was probably 2004.
That too, as well. I always do the folk festival. It's a
Okay.
good thing you didn't come this time. It was so windy and they had to
Yeah.
shut things down.
I haven't been back in a few years. Rachel and I went, gosh, I don't know how many years ago. And it was a lot of fun. Got to see a lot of the same people and meet some new people. And yeah, it's wonderful. But they've sort of chased the old time musicians out. There seems to be a lot more bluegrass than old time there now.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of hard to find the jams. There's like one porch of one hotel.
That's the Inn at Mountain View. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Inn at Mountain View. It's right next to where the Artisans Market is. So we get to hear that while I'm there.
Yeah.
Scott and Shay, they own the music store there.
Yeah. They're really wonderful.
And their son.
He's a brilliant luthier. I love
and
him.
then Lucas too, right? Lucas and his wife, Eden. They're good players.
Yeah.
Music is huge in my life, and that's part of the reason I love Stone County.
Yeah, I love Stone County too. I spend a lot of money on gas driving back and forth to Stone County, and it's always a wonderful healing place to be.
Yeah, well, we could talk forever, but I guess we probably well, there's Joe. Maybe he has a question. Joe Doster. Just
I think there might have been one other person who was about to ask a question.
Oh, okay, good.
If I maybe I misheard, but if anybody wanted to try again.
Hi, I have a quick question. I know that this program provides a lot of for people actually already have like a basic technique, right, in different fields.
Yes.
Okay.
Are you asking about the program itself?
Yes.
And yes. So this program is open to master artists and apprentices, and they apply together. So our target is really artists who share a community. And ideally the apprentice has a base level of skill, and that's so that way they can really dive into the apprenticeship with the aim of, growing their skill and hopefully being a master one day themselves. Because for us, this is both about making sure artists have, recognition and financial support, but it's also about encouraging knowledge transmission within communities. So our master artists, as you've seen, are like such huge wealths of knowledge, and we want to be able to have a program that encourages our master artists to share that knowledge with the new generation.
Yes.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. But I just wondering, is there any program offer to the group actually don't have any technology, don't have any a foundation for different fields?
We don't have a program strictly for that, but I will say we have had, our program's relatively new, but I have been a reviewer for other apprenticeship programs. It's not necessarily a deal breaker. I think, especially if you're a member of the cultural community anyway, but maybe you don't have a particular skill in that art form, but you're part of that social group anyway, or you share sort of other commonalities. I think you can make a case in that way. But we don't have any other programs at this moment, although we hope to be able to grow and add more programs.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, and I'll put my email in chat if you have more specific questions, because we're growing. So if I can get ideas from, like, if you see a need that we're not meeting, we always want to know about it.
Yeah. So me, I'm really interested in different formats, but I don't have any experience. My intention is there any program that I can do some basic experiment to try a few different things? I actually see or experiment in different type of format, like metals and like glasses. See actually where is my interest, and I could focus on more in that particular directions.
Actually, our artist here might be able to answer that question. My first thought is like the Arkansas Craft School. Say, Pat, Allison, do you have ideas for different places where folks can go to sort of learn the basics of different art forms?
Well, where does she live?
Yeah.
I live in Arkansas, Fayetteville.
In
Oh,
Fayetteville,
in Fayetteville. Cool.
Fayetteville? Okay.
I would recommend going to the Ozark Folk Center. I'm sorry about my dog.
Oh, Focus Center. Okay. So that's the Arkansas Focus Center.
Ozark Folk Center.
Right, right. And the Arkansas Craft School, it's also in Mountain View. But
Oh,
you can also, ESSA is closer to you. The Eureka Springs School of the Arts,
mhm. Oh,
and they
okay.
might have some kind of sampler class. I'll suggest that to them when I'm planning on helping them get a glass studio one of these days. They don't have one, so.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank
And
you.
I believe that in the fall festival out at Meadow Creek, there will be some workshops, some music workshops.
Music. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sorry I don't have more information about that right now, but if you keep an eye out for it, yes, there should be some workshops during that festival.
Yeah, yeah. And I think this is a very interesting webinar because I never see actually people showcase how they made it, like a different type of, just for a specific subject, very focus on one subject. So it's a very interesting webinar to me. I never had this kind of experience before.
Okay.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, thank you for coming. And I'll say, going to some of these events like at the Arkansas Craft School or workshops, that is typically how a lot of our apprentices meet their master artists, right? They go to the events like this, start that relationship and think, you know what, I want to learn from them more. And then those are usually the perfect ideal applicants for our program.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so unless we have any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and get ready to close this out. I appreciate our guest speakers, your time and your presentations were all so wonderful. It's just been a real privilege. So, I'm happy that the University of Arkansas and AFTA is hosting this series and we're able to do this type of thing. So thank you guys all so much.
Thank you. It's
Thank
wonderful.
you.